In the eyes of everyone around us, Serena and I had everything a family could want. A comfortable home, a bright little daughter, and what appeared to be a love that had survived the awkward, uncertain years of early marriage and settled into something warm and reliable. Even I believed it. 7 years into our marriage, I genuinely thought we would grow old together, that we would watch Lily graduate, watch her marry, hold her children one day, and that Serena and I would be the couple sitting side by side at the back of every important room, still reaching for each other's hands. But I was wrong. Slowly, quietly, without me ever noticing the exact moment it began, Serena grew distant. She flinched whenever I reached for her. A simple hand on her shoulder made her body go rigid. Later, after everything fell apart, I found a message she had sent to her closest friend, Claire. What do you do when physical disgust and financial comfort start pulling you in opposite directions? I did not find that message until much later. By then, the answer had already been given, not in words, but in actions. The answer had a name. Damien. Damien was the man Serena had quietly loved since childhood. They had grown up in the same neighborhood, attended the same school, and somewhere along the way, she had carried a piece of him inside her long after their paths separated. He had gone abroad to study medicine, built a career overseas, and then, without warning, returned. From the moment his plane touched down, the clock on my marriage began counting backward. 1 month. That was all it took. The night it truly began, Serena was the one who went to collect Damien from the airport. She did not tell me that. She called from the car, her voice measured and professional, and told me there had been an emergency surgery at Riverside General Hospital, where she worked as a cardiothoracic surgeon. She said she would not be home that night. I told her to take care of herself. Then I went and finished reading Lily her bedtime story. Our daughter clutched her small teddy bear, the one with the worn left ear from years of being hugged too tightly, and drifted off to sleep with the ease only children possess. I turned off the lamp, stood in the doorway for a moment watching her breathe, and felt that particular quiet contentment that comes from a house where everything seems, on the surface, to be fine. It did not last the night. Sometime after midnight, I was pulled from sleep by a soft, broken sound. I reached out instinctively and found Lily's forehead burning beneath my palm. The thermometer confirmed what I already feared, 39.2 degrees. My chest tightened the way it always did when she was sick, that particular parental dread that has nothing to do with reason and everything to do with love. I called Serena. The phone rang for a long time before going unanswered. I called again. It rang twice, then the line went dead. She had cut it off. I wrapped Lily in her thickest blanket, grabbed the car keys, and drove through the empty streets to Riverside General Hospital. The emergency ward at that hour smelled the way all hospitals smell at midnight, disinfectant, anxiety, and something underneath both that has no name. I queued at the registration desk with Lily half-conscious in my arms, paid the fees, collected the paperwork, and ran between cold corridors while my daughter murmured for her mother in a voice so small it lodged itself somewhere behind my ribs. At the corner near the laboratory, I ran into Dr. Park, a colleague from Serena's department. He had just come out of surgery and looked worn through. When he saw me, he paused with visible surprise. "Nathan. This late, is Lily unwell?" "High fever," I said, shifting so he could see her clearly. He clicked his tongue with concern and then said, "Why didn't you call Serena? She took the day off today. She should be home resting." The floor did not move. The walls did not shift. But something inside me went very, very still. "She took the day off?" Dr. Park nodded. "Asked the director for several days, actually. Said she had something important to deal with." He paused, reading my expression. "You didn't know?" His phone rang before I could answer, and he excused himself with an apologetic glance and disappeared down the corridor. I stood alone in the hallway with my feverish daughter in my arms and the winter air cutting through the open window at the far end. The cold went past my skin and settled in my bones. I looked down at Lily's flushed face and felt the absurdity of the moment settle over me like a second skin. Her mother had taken several days off. Her mother was not saving anyone's life. Her mother had rejected my call without hesitation. And her daughter had been burning with fever all night in an empty house. At 3 a.m, I carried Lily home after her 4-drip was finished. She slept heavily against my shoulder. I lay her down, tucked the blanket under her chin, and sat in the living room with my phone in my hand, unable to sleep. I began scrolling, the way one does when the mind is too loud to rest. A welcoming party that extravagant would leave a trail, someone always uploaded videos to show off. The algorithm, with its unsettling intelligence, seemed to sense exactly what kind of wound I was pressing on, and it delivered accordingly. The first video had been posted by Claire, Serena's closest friend at the hospital. The caption read, "My best girl deserves happiness forever." In the footage, Serena wore a champagne-colored dress I had never seen before. The back was cut nearly to the waist, far more daring than anything she had ever worn around me. She looked radiant. She was leaning toward Damien, picking food from a shared plate and placing it on his, smiling with a warmth I had not seen directed at me in years. Another video appeared, filmed by one of Damien's friends. The camera lingered openly on the two of them while a popular love song played in the background. Serena held a glass of wine, her cheeks faintly flushed, her head tilted upward as she looked at him. That look, completely absorbed, like a woman watching someone she had waited a long time to be near again, was something I had never seen on her face before. Not once in 7 years had she looked at me that way. I watched the video twice. Then I put the phone face down on the table and changed the cold compress on Lily's forehead. Dawn was breaking, a gray, reluctant kind of morning, when the key turned in the lock. Serena stepped inside. The champagne dress was now wrinkled and stale, the hem marked with dark drops of wine. Before she had fully crossed the threshold, the smell reached me, alcohol, and something else. A cologne that was not mine and had never belonged in this house. She noticed me sitting in the shadow of the sofa and stopped walking. Her eyes slid away from mine toward the corner of the room. She tossed her handbag onto the hallway cabinet and began her explanation. A last-minute department dinner, the director had attended, her phone had died. She told the lie cleanly. In another life, one where I had not spent the night watching a dozen different videos, I might have believed her. I picked up the small bottle of children's fever reducer from the coffee table and tilted it slowly. Lily's temperature hit 39.2 last night. My voice came out without any particular edge. Like a statement of fact. Like weather. Serena's composure fractured. She came toward me quickly, her voice sharpening. What? Is she all right now? Why didn't you call me? That question deserved some kind of award. I almost laughed, and then I did laugh, a short, hollow sound that surprised even me. I did call, I said. I opened the call log and turned the screen toward her. First call, no answer. Second call, 2 rings, then you cut it off. The maternal concern she had constructed so quickly dissolved from her face. Interesting timing, I continued calmly, given that your best friend wishes you happiness forever. I repeated Claire's caption word for word, watching Serena's pupils contract like something had been pulled too tight behind her eyes. You look remarkable in that dress, by the way. Damien's friend has excellent taste in background music. Today you will marry me. Quite the choice. Color drained steadily from her face with each sentence. And one more thing, I added. You told me you were working overtime. You had actually taken several days off. Who exactly did you think you were fooling? Her lips trembled. Real panic had finally arrived in those eyes I had once found beautiful above all other things. How do you know this? I stood up and walked toward her. I was taller by a full head, and she had to look up at me. I leaned close enough to speak quietly, in a voice meant only for the two of us. I want to ask you just one thing. When I made that second call, the one you dismissed without a second thought, was Damien's hand on your waist, or on your shoulder? You're talking nonsense, she snapped. Damien and I are completely innocent. That call, I simply didn't hear it. I picked up my phone and opened a video. High definition. Looping. I held it out toward her without a word. In the footage, she smiled sweetly as she handed Damien a glass of wine. When she leaned forward, the deep neckline of her dress revealed more than it was meant to, and Damien's gaze happened to linger there for a moment the camera caught perfectly. Is it because even you know this is shameful, I said slowly, that you need so many explanations just to clean it up? She looked displeased, the particular displeasure of someone caught but unwilling to be accountable. This is exactly why I didn't tell you. You were always going to react like this. Damien and I have nothing going on. Nothing, I repeated. The word sounded strange in my mouth, like something hollow. Tell me, since when does Riverside General Hospital offer overtime that means hosting welcome parties? Since when does the chief surgeon need to personally drink with a guest and spend the night at a hotel? I paused. Next time, should we move the patients directly to a karaoke bar and conduct consultations there? How dare you humiliate me like this, she exploded. The anger that came off her was real and burning, the anger of someone exposed rather than someone wronged. I'm stating facts, I said. I unlocked my phone in front of her and opened my contacts. Here's what we'll do. Tonight I'll call a junior classmate of mine from university. She just got divorced and has been having a difficult time. I'll take her out for drinks, and if we happen to drink too much, perhaps I'll book a room and stay the night. I looked up at her. Don't read too much into it. We're just innocent friends. You wouldn't dare, she said. My finger hovered over the name. Watch me. After that argument, Serena behaved herself for 2 days. She came home on time. She bathed Lily and read her bedtime stories. She even washed the dishes one evening, which was so unusual that I stood in the kitchen doorway watching her with the sense that something in the universe had briefly shifted. Watching her clumsy but earnest movements, I almost believed something had changed. Maybe the marriage was not entirely lost. Maybe there was still something worth preserving. But the good days ended on the 3rd. By the 5th evening, she did not come home at all. The excuses were unchanged. The hospital was busy. Surgery had run long. There was a department dinner. I stopped arguing with her. I stopped questioning. I felt like a farmer watching the same weeds push through the same soil after pulling them out dozens of times, too exhausted to keep pulling, beginning to wonder whether it would simply be easier to leave the field behind entirely. That evening, after finishing Lily's bedtime story, she wrapped her small arms around my neck and asked in the quiet voice children use when they are trying very hard to be brave about something, "Daddy, why isn't Mommy home?" She promised to come to my school sports day. My chest contracted. The kindergarten's parent-child athletics day was in 2 days, and the teacher had specifically said both parents were expected to attend. I typed a message to Serena, "Lily's sports day is the day after tomorrow. You promised you would come. Please be home early." After a long wait, a single word appeared on the screen, "Okay." I stared at it for a while. Then I put the phone down. The evening before the sports day, the entrance hallway remained empty. Lily ran out of her room repeatedly, climbing onto her toes to peer toward the door, waiting and being disappointed each time. She constructed small explanations for her mother's absence. Perhaps Mommy had gotten lost, perhaps Mommy was saving a very important patient, perhaps Mommy had forgotten the way home. Children's imaginations are an act of mercy. They build shelters out of whatever is available. At 10 o'clock that night, Lily cried herself to sleep in my arms, her small body shaking with it. I carried her to her room, tucked the blanket around her, and stepped out onto the balcony when my phone lit up. "Serena. I can't come back tonight," she said. Her voice was soft, careful. Behind her, I could hear faint music and the blur of other voices. "There had been an emergency surgery," she said. "A complicated case, perforated appendicitis. She was the lead surgeon and could not leave. She would go directly to the kindergarten in the morning. Another surgery. The patients at Riverside General must have been extraordinarily numerous, given how often they required her specifically, after dark, at venues with background music." "Which case?" I asked. A pause. "Perforated appendicitis. It's a complicated presentation." "Go ahead then," I said. "Be careful." And I hung up. I opened the social media app out of habit, and my thumb stopped scrolling. A friend of Damien's, someone I had never followed, but whose post appeared because of mutual connections, had uploaded a video at 9:30 that evening. A birthday celebration in a private room, the lights low and warm, a large cake surrounded by laughing people. Damien sat in the center, eyes closed, making a wish. And beside him, leading the room in song, clapping harder than anyone else, wearing a soft white knitted sweater that made her look gentle and completely untroubled, was my wife. The surgeon. The one currently standing over a complicated appendectomy case. I took a screenshot. Less than 2 minutes later, the post had been deleted. But photographs, unlike people, do not change their minds. I opened a new folder in my gallery. I titled it simply, Evidence. At the sports day registration area, parents arrived in pairs, their children hanging off their arms and demanding attention in the loud, joyful way children do when they feel completely safe. Lily stood beside me with a small frown, one hand gripping the hem of my jacket. I crouched down and straightened the numbered tag on her chest. Are you ready? Daddy is going to help you in first place today. She nodded hard, with the concentrated seriousness of a 5-year-old preparing for something important. But the look in her eyes, that faint, persistent waiting, was impossible to mistake. Will Mommy come? I held her face gently between my hands. Mommy is fighting monsters right now. Let's win first, and if we bring home a gold medal, she'll come. Lily and I won the 3-legged race. She received a shiny plastic medal and was invited onto the stage by her teacher to say a few words. Standing at the microphone, her face a deep red, she spoke in a voice that was surprisingly loud and clear for such a small person. I'm very happy today. The thing I most want to tell Mommy is, next time, you have to come with me. I miss you very much. Warm applause rose from the gathered parents. I stood among them and watched my daughter on that small stage and felt something wedge itself behind my sternum. A complete family matters deeply to a child. It matters enough that a person might choose to endure extraordinary things just to preserve the appearance of one. Standing there, I turned that idea over carefully, wondering if it was wisdom or cowardice. A familiar silhouette appeared at the field entrance. Serena. Late, but she had come. She wore casual clothes and her makeup was carefully done, no sign at all of a night spent in surgery. She caught sight of Lily just as our daughter was stepping off the stage. Mommy. Lily burst into tears immediately. She ran across the field on her short legs and collided with her mother's knees, gripping her tightly, crying so hard she could barely breathe. Serena crouched down and held her, looking genuinely uncertain how to comfort her, patting her back with the hesitant movements of someone trying to remember a skill they had let rust. I walked over. Let's find somewhere to eat. Buy Lily something to cheer her up. At the restaurant, Lily had just begun to calm down when Serena's phone rang. Something shifted in her face, a subtle tightening, a slight drawing inward. She stood and stepped away to take the call. When she returned, her expression carried the rehearsed blend of apology and urgency I had come to recognize, the way you recognize a particular sound in an old building, the one that tells you something is about to give way. George, I'm sorry. There's a car accident patient. Severe bleeding. They need me urgently. She was already reaching for her bag. I nodded without looking up. Of course. The patient comes first. She seemed surprised by how easily I agreed. She kissed Lily on the cheek, grabbed her things, and left. Lily watched the door close behind her mother and went very quiet. I took out my phone and called Felix. Felix was a college friend of mine who now worked in the general surgery department at Riverside General, right beside Serena's department. He picked up on the second ring. A car accident patient, I said, with severe bleeding. Serious enough to call Serena in. Did your hospital receive a case like that tonight? A brief silence. A car accident? No. And Nathan, didn't Serena take leave today? I saw her application this morning. Ah, I said. I must have misheard. Thanks, Felix. Nathan. Felix's voice changed, dropping lower. I'm going to be straight with you. People in the department have been talking for weeks. Serena and that new overseas doctor, Damien, they have lunch together almost every day. I've seen it myself. I'll keep an eye out and send you anything I catch. Someone should. I thanked him and hung up. I looked down at the plate in front of me and realized I had no appetite at all. Not long after, my phone buzzed. Felix had sent a photograph. The setting was an upmarket Western restaurant. Serena and Damien sat close together, their heads inclined toward each other as they looked at something on his phone, both of them smiling with the ease of two people who had forgotten to perform for an audience. She was wearing the same casual outfit she had worn to the sports day that morning. The operating room, it seemed, had excellent ambience. Lily caught a glimpse of the screen before I could put the phone away. She stared at it, then looked up at me. "Daddy. Mommy is bad," she whispered. Her voice was very small. "Lily doesn't want her anymore." I held my daughter tight against my chest and said nothing. I could not find words that were both honest and kind. I saved the photograph and placed it in the folder marked evidence. I had just managed to settle Lily to sleep when my phone vibrated with an unfamiliar number. Something made me pause before answering, a presentiment, the kind the body registers before the mind catches up. When I answered, it was my mother-in-law, her voice fractured with tears. "Nathan," Harold collapsed. "He's at Riverside General. Please come quickly. We can't reach Serena no matter how many times we try." I was out of bed before she finished the sentence. By the time I arrived, handled the admissions process, coordinated with the doctors, paid for the initial tests, and collected the necessary medications, it was deep into the night before Harold stabilized. He lay in the hospital bed looking smaller than I had ever seen him. My mother-in-law held both my hands and looked at me with exhausted, apologetic eyes. "You've worked so hard again, Nathan. Serena, that girl." She shook her head. "I know things between you two haven't been easy. Please be patient with her. Whatever problems you have, work through them together. Talk openly." Harold opened his eyes and beckoned me closer with a slow, deliberate gesture. I sat beside the bed and leaned in. "Don't listen to her trying to smooth things over," he said, his voice low but steady. "Serena is my daughter and I know exactly what she's doing before she even does it. Her heart has already wandered. I can see it." He stopped to gather breath. "Back at that intersection, years ago, if you hadn't pushed my wife out of the path of that car, I'd be putting flowers on her grave every year. Our family owes you a debt. If Serena has wronged you, don't hold back for our sake. Do what you need to do. I'll stand behind you." He paused, his gaze finding mine directly. "And take care of that little girl. Whatever happens, take care of Lily." My eyes stung. I pressed his hand and nodded. I did not trust my voice. On the way to collect Lily from my mother's house that night, Serena finally called. The moment I answered, her voice came at me like something thrown. "You went behind my back to my parents? You actually went there? No wonder you were being so agreeable earlier, you were saving it all up for this moment. How petty can you be?" I could hear my mother-in-law in the background trying to settle her down. Listening to the accusations, each one built on the assumption that her father's hospitalization was somehow a trap I had engineered, I felt a deep, spreading exhaustion move through me. I had no energy left for this. In her mind, the nights away from home were not the issue. The lies were not the issue. The one truly unforgivable act was that she had been made to look bad in front of her parents. "I'm not that free," I said, and hung up. Back at the hospital, Serena's mother had finally said enough. Serena stood in the corridor holding her silent phone, and her mother's voice, tight with exhausted disappointment, cut through whatever defense Serena had been assembling. "Look at yourself. A married woman out every night, turning up in photographs everywhere, who exactly do you think you're fooling?" Harold, still hoarse from the oxygen mask, pointed at her from the bed with a shaking hand. "You said you were working overtime. Which department? Does Damien's welcome party count as a surgical procedure?" Serena's face had gone the color of chalk. "Dad, what are you talking about?" Harold picked up his phone from the bedside table and dialed a number while she watched. "Director Choi. This is Serena's father. Could you send me her attendance record for this month?" "Yes, right now. I want to see exactly how much overtime Dr. Liu has actually been logging." Serena lunged for the phone, her voice cracking. "Dad, stop, don't." But the reaching, the desperation, the sudden panic, all of it said more than any attendance record could. In the weeks that followed, Serena came home only a handful of times. When she did, she arrived like a tenant passing through, declaring herself tired, retreating to the bedroom with her phone, sliding a door between herself and any real conversation. The excuses continued recycling themselves. Working late. A difficult surgery. A departmental commitment. Meanwhile, my phone accumulated what Felix cheerfully referred to as overtime evidence. A high-end restaurant one week, Serena resting her chin in her hand and smiling at Damien across a table spread with good food. A concert the following week, the two of them so close their heads were nearly touching, sharing whatever private commentary the music inspired. Felix's captions were brief and dry. Tomahawk steak tonight. Your wife has a solid appetite. High culture this week. Refined taste. One by one, I saved each photograph into the folder. The night Lily stopped eating was the night I reached the end of whatever reserve I had been drawing from. She hadn't touched her dinner, and after I had tried every distraction I could think of, she clung to my neck and cried in broken, airless sobs, calling for her mother over and over until her face turned red and her breathing became ragged. I picked up the car keys. When I arrived at Riverside General and found Serena's department office, the door was slightly open. I could hear voices from inside, warm, unhurried. I raised my hand to knock, but something in the tone made me pause. Damien's voice, teasing and familiar, "You're too stubborn. If something's wrong, why not just tell me?" Then Serena's, softer, carrying the particular texture of complaint that belongs only to people who feel understood. "What would be the point of telling you?" I pushed the door open. Serena had her back to me. Damien's hand rested on her back, moving in slow, consoling circles. The scene was quiet and intimate in a way that was worse than anything loud would have been. When the door opened, they both turned. The moment Serena saw me, saw Lily in my arms, her body went rigid. She stepped back from Damien instinctively. I said nothing. I looked at them both for a moment, then pulled the door gently shut behind me. "Sorry to interrupt." Lily stared at the closed door, her red-rimmed eyes fixed on it. "Daddy," she said, in the small, puzzled voice of a child placing pieces together carefully, "why was Mommy hugging that man? Does she not like us anymore?" About a minute later, the door opened. Serena came out quickly, panic still visible beneath the composure she was trying to reassemble. "Nathan. You should knock before walking into someone's office." She pressed forward with the explanation, her voice gaining a brittle kind of confidence. "It was nothing," she said. There had been something caught on Damien's collar and she had been helping him. It was completely innocent. I took out my phone and opened the photograph Felix had sent that afternoon. In it, Serena sat beside Damien at a cafe table flooded with afternoon light. She was holding a spoon with a bite of cake on it and extending it toward Damien's mouth, her expression entirely absorbed in content. I turned the screen toward her. Did something get stuck on his mouth as well? Her face moved through a rapid sequence of colors. Damien appeared behind her, positioning himself at her shoulder with the comfortable authority of someone who considers himself at home wherever he stands. "You should knock before entering someone else's office. That's basic courtesy." He spoke with the measured confidence of a man accustomed to being right. "Rather than checking up on your wife at her workplace, shouldn't you be focusing on your marriage? Serena and I are colleagues. Our relationship is entirely appropriate." Before I could respond, Lily's small arm shot out, her finger pointing directly at Damien. "You're a bad man." Her voice, hoarse from crying, rang clearly down the corridor. "Give my mommy back. She doesn't come home because of you." The corridor went still. A nurse passing at the far end slowed her steps. A doctor from the neighboring department appeared in their doorway, drawn by the sound. Damien's composed expression developed a crack. Serena's face, however, darkened completely. She shook Damien's hand from her shoulder and crossed the distance to me in quick, purposeful strides. There was fire in her eyes, aimed, with frightening precision, at the child in my arms. "Lily." Her voice was low and edged. "Who taught you to speak like that? What nonsense are you saying?" She looked up at me. "Is this how you've been raising her? Teaching a small child to make accusations? To slander adults?" "She says what she sees," I said. "She sees what you do. Stop arguing and have that child apologize to Damien. Right now." I looked at her for a long moment. Apologize for what, exactly? For seeing her mother feed cake to another man. Serena's expression twisted past anger into something uglier. She raised her hand and swung it toward Lily's face. I had already moved. My arm came up and caught her wrist in the air. Her hand trembled against my grip. "Are you out of your mind?" My voice went cold in a way that surprised even me. "You did something wrong, and you're going to take it out on a child." "I'm disciplining my daughter." That's my right. Her chest heaved. She pulled her wrist free and raised her hand again. The string inside me broke. I stepped in front of Lily. My arm came up and deflected Serena's hand sharply. She staggered backward from the force, caught herself against the wall, and stared at me with something I had never seen in her face before, something close to genuine shock. Then the sound rang out. Sharp, definitive, echoing off the corridor walls. Time seemed to pause. The hallway had gone completely silent. Staff who had drifted closer stood frozen in place. Someone near the nurse's station was already whispering, "Isn't that Dr. Serena Lou's husband? He always seemed so reasonable. Did you see her? She was going to hit the child." He blocked it. I knew something was off between her and Dr. Damien. They've been inseparable for weeks. "Look at that little girl, she's terrified." Each whisper landed on Serena's face like something physical. The professional image she had maintained so carefully in this building, the composed, capable surgeon who inspired respect, was coming apart in the exact place where it had been built. I shook out my hand and stepped toward her. "Serena. Since Damien came back, do you even remember what you've done? Staying out all night. Lying about your schedule, every single time. Your daughter had a high fever and you hung up my call without a second thought. Your father collapsed and you were unreachable. And now," I paused. "You tried to hit our daughter." "You hit me," she said, her voice trembling with humiliation. Damien surged forward, grabbing for my collar. What kind of man raises a hand to a woman? I did not bother stepping aside. The moment his hand closed on my collar, I planted my weight and drove my knee up, then followed with a controlled kick to his midsection. He folded, flew backward 2 meters, and hit the wall hard enough to rattle the frame on the notice board beside it. He slid down and stayed there, curled over his knees, unable to collect himself. A collective sound moved through the corridor. Serena screamed and ran toward him. "Damien and I are innocent. We never did anything." "If you're so blameless," I said, "then tell me, at his birthday party last week, when you were standing closer to him than his own mother, what exactly were you wishing for him? Was that part of your surgical training?" More whispers erupted from the growing audience. I could hear people connecting dots around me, the birthday celebration, the lunches, the long absences, the lies. Serena looked toward Damien, clearly waiting for him to stand, to speak, to offer something. But Damien was still on the floor, dark-faced and gasping, his refined overseas-educated composure nowhere in evidence. "I want a divorce." Serena's voice cracked and split. "I cannot live like this one more day." "Fine," I said. "One word." She blinked. "Since we're doing this publicly, let's do it properly. Let your colleagues be the ones to decide how innocent Dr. Lou really is." I reached into the backpack, the one that also held Lily's water bottle and afternoon snacks, and removed a thick brown envelope. I threw it upward, hard, and dozens of printed photographs scattered from it like leaves, drifting down around Serena's head and shoulders, settling at her feet, covering the corridor floor. I bent and picked up one photograph. June 3rd, Damien's return. "You told me there was a department dinner." I held it up, her face in it, smiling, radiant, leaning toward him across a candlelit table. Then I let it fall. I picked up another. "The day of Lily's sports day. You said there was an emergency surgery. Here you are at a Western restaurant at 7 in the evening, having a very unhurried meal." I dropped it. "His birthday. Another surgery. Here you are in a private room leading 30 people in a birthday song." I dropped it. One by one I went through them. Every lie she had told me, matched to a photograph that showed where she had actually been. Our anniversary. Weekends she called conferences. Evenings that turned into nights. From the envelope, I retrieved the last document, a copy of Serena's monthly attendance record. I tossed it onto the pile. "There are your overtime records. Would you like to point out which operating room you were actually stationed in?" Damien, who had managed to get himself partially upright against the wall, lurched forward and tried to gather the photographs. I stepped aside and landed a clean roundhouse kick across the back of his knee. He went down again with a sound that echoed, crashing into the baseboard and lying still. I turned to the 2 security guards who had finally arrived, and said pleasantly, track team in secondary school. A few years of kickboxing. He was less of a challenge than he looked. The guards exchanged a glance that contained something very close to sympathy, then took hold of my arms gently, more protective than restraining. I took out my phone and dialed the police non-emergency line. Yes. Riverside General Hospital, 3rd floor outpatient wing. There's been an incident. Someone attempted to strike a child and I responded. I'm at the scene. Please send someone. I reached into the deepest pocket of the backpack one final time and removed a document. I held it out and let it fall at Serena's feet. Divorce agreement. I've already signed. I looked at her in the resulting silence, in front of her colleagues and her patients' families and every passing stranger who had drifted close enough to witness this. Lily stays with me. My voice was not raised. It did not need to be. You are not fit to be her mother. I spent 24 hours at the police station. Damien's injuries were documented as minor, insufficient for criminal charges. I paid a settlement, signed the required forms, and walked out into the gray morning. My father's car was parked across the street with the hazard lights blinking steadily. He had not slept. The whites of his eyes were threaded with red. He got out when he saw me, said nothing, shook a cigarette from the pack in his pocket, and held it out. He lit it without being asked. I took a long drag and coughed until my eyes watered. The smoke tasted terrible and I was grateful for it. Where are Mom and Lily? Home. Just fell asleep. He lit one for himself. His voice had the texture of gravel worn smooth. Your mother and I went to the hospital yesterday. We heard everything. And your father-in-law called. He exhaled slowly. Harold kept apologizing. Said he was sorry to you, sorry to our family. Said he can't do anything with Serena anymore. Whatever we decide, he won't stand in the way. My father dropped the cigarette butt and crushed it under his shoe. This marriage has to end. The weight that had been sitting behind my sternum for months shifted and fell away. I breathed more easily than I had in a long time. When I returned to the house I had shared with Serena, I pushed open the door and stood in the entrance for a moment. The space was cold and still, and the air carried the ghost of her perfume, a sweetness that had soured for me. I went to the storage room and brought out suitcases. I packed Lily's things first. Her small dresses, her everyday clothes, her pajamas with the small clouds printed on them. Her rabbit, the stuffed one with the worn left ear. Her picture books. And from the shelf above her desk, a drawing she had made some months back, 3 figures holding hands under a large yellow sun, a small girl in pigtails flanked by her mother and father, all 3 of them grinning with the absolute conviction of people who cannot imagine this arrangement ever changing. I held it for a long time. Then I packed my own things. A few changes of clothes, some books, a laptop. The expensive suit Serena had bought me over the years I left hanging in the wardrobe. Before I left, I placed the signed divorce agreement in the center of the coffee table where it could not be missed. I took one last look at the house, at the life assembled inside it, the small artifacts of a marriage that had been real once, even if it had not managed to remain so, and I walked out. I pulled the door shut behind me. Outside, the morning had cleared. The sky was pale blue and sharp, the kind that follows a hard frost. My mother called as I reached the car. Nathan. Lily keeps asking when you're coming. She won't eat breakfast. Tell her I'm on the way, I said. Tell her to save me some. I got into the car and drove. The weeks following the hospital confrontation were not quiet ones. Serena's attorney made contact within 3 days, signaling that she intended to contest the custody arrangement. I had expected this. Her lawyer was efficient and spoke in the clipped language of someone accustomed to negotiation, but the foundation beneath his position was weak, and both he and I understood it. The photographs were real. The attendance records were real. The testimony of colleagues who had watched an attending physician attempt to strike a child in a hospital corridor was real. Serena, for her part, made 2 attempts to call me directly during that period. The first came on a rainy Tuesday evening while I was helping Lily with a drawing. I looked at the screen, let it ring out, and returned to helping Lily color in the sky. The second came late at night, 11 days later. This time I answered. Her voice on the other end was quieter than I was used to. Stripped of its usual momentum. I'm not calling to fight, she said. All right, I said. A silence settled between us, not the charged, hostile kind, but something more exhausted. I wanted to say, she stopped. Started again. I know what I did. I'm not asking you to excuse it. She paused. I'm asking if Lily can still know her mother. Even if we're not together. Even if you have every right to prevent it. Another pause. I don't want her to grow up thinking I never loved her. Because I did. I do. I sat with this for a moment. It was the most honest thing she had said to me in longer than I could clearly remember. That's not my decision to make, I said. It's Lily's. When she's older. But I won't poison it. I won't tell her to hate you. A long exhale on the other end of the line. Thank you. I said nothing more. I ended the call and sat in the quiet of the living room for a while, listening to the sound of my daughter breathing steadily in the next room. The divorce was finalized 43 days after the hospital corridor. Serena did not contest custody in the end. Her lawyer submitted a single paragraph on her behalf, a statement that she recognized the current circumstances were not conducive to providing Lily with a stable environment, and that she would not oppose the arrangement. Harold, true to his word, attended the proceedings on my side. The signing took less time than I expected. I sat across from Serena at the table in the mediator's office, and for a moment we were just two people in a room, not the couple who had built a life together, not the adversaries who had faced each other in a hospital corridor, just two people who had arrived at an ending. She looked tired. The kind of tired that is not fixed by sleep. She signed. I signed. The mediator gathered the papers and left. We sat in silence for a moment. Outside, the sound of ordinary street traffic continued without interruption. I didn't plan it, Serena said. Her voice was quiet and stripped of its usual edge. I didn't plan any of it. I looked at her. I know. She nodded once, slowly. Then she stood, picked up her coat, and walked out. I remained at the table for another minute, looking at nothing in particular. Then I took out my phone and called my mother. Is Lily awake? She's here. She's been waiting. Put her on. A shuffling sound, then a small voice, very close to the receiver. Daddy. Hi, sweetheart. Are you coming home now? I stood up and walked toward the door, pushing it open with my shoulder. The light outside was warm. Ordinary. The kind that persists regardless of what happens underneath it. Already on the way, I said. 3 months passed. Lily settled back into her routines with the resilience of children who, once the uncertainty is removed, simply proceed. She attended kindergarten, won another medal at a relay race, and developed an inexplicable but passionate interest in lizards, a phase her grandmother found deeply alarming and that I found entirely reasonable. She did not often ask about Serena. Once, on a Sunday afternoon while I was helping her with a puzzle, she said, without looking up from the pieces, Daddy, do you think Mommy is okay? I considered the question carefully. I think so, I said. She pressed a puzzle piece into place. Good. And that was all. I did not hear from Serena directly during this period. What reached me came secondhand, through mutual acquaintances and the occasional letter from Harold, who wrote in the careful handwriting of a man who chose each word deliberately. From what I gathered, she and Damien had not lasted. The relationship, whatever it had truly been, had not survived the exposure, or perhaps had not survived the absence of obstacle. Some things exist only because of what stands in their way. Remove the barrier and they have nothing left to press against. Harold, in his last letter, wrote, Serena is working. That is something. She has not yet learned to sit with herself. But she is working, and I suppose that is how it begins. I read the letter twice, folded it carefully, and placed it in the desk drawer where I kept things I did not want to discard. It was a Saturday morning in early autumn when Lily announced, with the gravity of someone delivering important news, that she needed a pet lizard. I told her we would discuss it. She told me that meant no. I told her it meant we would discuss it. She crossed her arms and informed me that Daddy always says discuss when he means no, and she was not fooled. I looked at her for a moment, this small, sharp, entirely reasonable person, and felt something loosen in my chest. One lizard, I said. Small. And you clean the tank? She agreed immediately, shook my hand with great seriousness, and ran to tell her grandmother. It was the first time I had laughed in a long time. Not the hollow, short kind, the real kind that takes you slightly by surprise. That evening, after Lily was asleep, I sat on the balcony with a cup of tea going cold in my hands. The city below was doing what cities do at night, its noise reduced to a manageable hum, its lights sitting quietly in the dark. I had not sat out here in months. The last time had been in a different state of mind entirely. I thought about the call with Serena. I thought about Harold's letter. I thought about the photograph of the three figures under the yellow sun that was still in a drawer somewhere, not thrown away, not displayed, just kept. The way you keep things that record something true even after it has stopped being the present. I was not unhappy. That was the simplest way to put it. I was not unhappy, and the house was quiet, and Lily was well, and I had not known how much weight I had been carrying until I no longer felt it. Felix invited me to a dinner at the end of autumn. It was a gathering of a dozen or so people from various parts of our shared past, the kind of low-key event assembled by someone who wants their friends to meet each other and is optimistic enough to believe it will work. I almost didn't go. Lily had a mild cold and I was reluctant to leave her with my mother, but my mother waved me out the door with the authority of a woman who has raised one child to adulthood and considers herself qualified on all related matters. The dinner was held in a private room at a restaurant that was neither too expensive nor too casual. I arrived slightly late, hung my coat, and found a seat. The woman sitting 2 places to my left was named Margaret. She was a research physician, something involving pediatric immunology, which she explained with the practiced efficiency of someone who has learned to condense it for social situations. She had clear, steady eyes and the particular quality of attention that belongs to people who are genuinely interested in what is being said to them, rather than simply waiting for their turn to speak. We talked about unremarkable things at first. The food. Felix's questionable taste in wine. A documentary we had both apparently watched in the same week without knowing the other existed. At some point the table grew louder around us, and our conversation became its own smaller, quieter thing within the larger one. Near the end of the evening, she said, "Felix mentioned you have a daughter." "Lily," I said. 5 years old. Currently fascinated by lizards. "We are getting one." Her idea. Something shifted in Margaret's expression, not pity, which I had learned to recognize and dislike, but something warmer and more straightforward. "That's a very good age for lizards. She would agree with you completely." She laughed, a real one, the kind that doesn't ask permission. I drove home that evening through streets quiet with late autumn cold. The dashboard clock read 11:15. My mother had left the hallway light on, and through the window I could see the faint blue glow of the television she fell asleep in front of most nights. I sat in the car for a moment before going in. I was not thinking about the evening in any grand way. Only about the particular quality of a conversation that had not quite finished, the sense of something that had been started and might, in time, be worth continuing. Margaret had said, near the end of the night, that she sometimes took her younger patients to a nature exhibit near the hospital, the kind with live reptiles. She had said it without agenda, without implication. Only the way you mention a thing that exists and might be of interest. I had said that Lily would love something like that. Margaret had said that was good to know. It was a small thing. A quiet thing. The kind that carries no promise and demands nothing, only leaves a door open. I switched off the engine and went inside. Lily was asleep on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket, her stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm. My mother was dozing in the armchair beside her, the television still playing softly. I lifted Lily carefully, carried her to her room, and tucked her in. She stirred just enough to murmur something unintelligible, then settled. I stood in the doorway of her room for a moment, watching her breathe. Then I turned off the light and went to bed. That should have been the end of the story in the simple sense. The divorce was done, Serena was gone from the house, and the worst of the damage had passed into memory. But some endings do not arrive cleanly. They leave loose threads, and life has a way of tugging on them until something else is revealed. The first loose thread came from Margaret. She texted me 2 days later. "Lily mentioned she likes frogs too. There's a small exhibit near the hospital on Saturday morning. If you're free, I could show you both around." I read the message twice before I replied. It was direct, but not pushy. Friendly, but not careless. I looked at Lily, who was sitting cross-legged on the floor with a picture book open upside down in front of her, and decided that a Saturday at a reptile exhibit sounded better than another morning of sitting at home and thinking too much. She'd like that. Thank you. That was how it started, not with sparks, not with some dramatic, cinematic moment, but with something ordinary enough to feel real. A plan. A time. A place. No promises. The exhibit was inside a low, bright building near the hospital grounds, the kind of place designed for children but quiet enough that adults stopped sounding performative after a few minutes. Lily walked in holding my hand and Margaret's hand alternately, as if deciding by committee who was safest. Margaret had brought a small packet of crackers for Lily and knew, somehow, which kinds of animals children ask about first. Not the largest ones. Not the most dangerous ones. The ones that blink slowly and sit still long enough to seem approachable. Lily watched a gecko on the glass with deep concentration. "Daddy," she whispered, "this one looks like it's judging me." Margaret laughed beside us. "I think that means it likes you." Lily considered this. "Then it should say so properly." I looked at Margaret and saw her trying not to smile too broadly, like she already understood that Lily was not a child to flatter but a small, sharp person to respect. For the first time in a long while, I felt something in the day loosen. Not healed. Just loosened. After that, Margaret became a familiar presence in a way I didn't force and didn't resist. Sometimes she texted to ask how Lily was doing after a cold or whether she had finally decided on a lizard. Sometimes I replied late, after Lily was asleep. Sometimes our messages ended with something practical, sometimes with a joke, sometimes with nothing at all. There was no urgency in any of it, which was probably why it felt safe. A month later, Felix noticed. We were leaving a small dinner when he leaned toward me and said in a low voice, "So are you pretending not to notice, or are you actually moving forward?" I glanced at him. "That's a rude question." "It's an accurate one." I didn't answer right away. The truth was that I had not decided what Margaret was in my life. I only knew that when I spoke to her, I didn't feel the need to prove anything. I didn't feel watched. I didn't feel tested. "I'm moving slowly," I said at last. Felix nodded as if that was the only sane answer. Good. Fast people make bad decisions. That, for some reason, stayed with me. Serena called once in winter. It was late enough that Lily was asleep and the apartment was quiet. I almost didn't answer, but the name on the screen kept me still for one extra second before I finally picked up. Her voice was calm, and that calmness mattered more than tears would have. "I'm not calling to disrupt anything," she said. "Then why are you calling?" A pause. "Harold's health isn't great. He wanted me to tell you that he's grateful you still let Lily visit." I looked toward Lily's room, then down at the table in front of me. "Tell him he doesn't need to thank me for that." "I know." Another pause. "I also know you won't trust anything I say now, but I wanted to tell you that I'm trying to do better. Not for you. Not for Damien. For Lily. And for myself." I didn't answer immediately. When betrayal is still fresh, anger feels stronger than memory. Later, memory becomes heavier. By then, what hurts most is not the original wound but the realization of how many smaller choices led there. "Trying is good," I said finally. "Just don't confuse it with repair." "I won't." We stayed silent for a moment. Then she said, "Lily drew a picture of a house with 3 windows. She said one was for you, one for me, and one for her lizard." Despite myself, I gave a short breath that was almost a laugh. "She's already planning the furniture." "I thought you should know," Serena said quietly. "That she still likes drawing us together." I closed my eyes for a second. "That doesn't mean she forgot." "No," Serena said. "It doesn't." That was the end of the call. I stood there in the kitchen after hanging up, listening to the refrigerator hum, and understood something I hadn't wanted to admit earlier. Serena was not part of my future, but she was still part of Lily's past, and those two things would have to exist in the same house of memory without destroying each other. That was not forgiveness. But it was peace, or the beginning of it. Spring arrived the way it usually does, without permission and with too much light. Lily outgrew one pair of shoes, then another. She stopped asking for her mother every night and started asking better questions instead, like why the moon looked different from the window on rainy evenings or whether lizards sleep with their eyes open. Margaret came by more often, though never in a way that felt intrusive. Sometimes she brought books. Once she brought a tiny terrarium with a model lizard inside because Lily was disappointed that the pet store had not yet had the right kind. Lily accepted it as an act of diplomacy. "You're good at this," I said one evening after Margaret had left and Lily was busy showing the terrarium to the grandmother with the solemnity of a museum guide. "At what?" "Making space without making noise." She looked at me for a moment, and the corner of her mouth lifted slightly. "That's either a compliment or an accusation." "Both, probably." She didn't deny it. And in that moment I knew I was past the point of pretending not to understand what was happening between us. It was not dramatic. It was not simple. But it was there. The final time I saw Serena at length was at a school event. Lily was on stage again, this time holding a small paper flower she had made herself. She had grown taller, more confident, and had developed the habit of standing with one hand on her hip when she felt strongly about something. After the performance, Serena approached cautiously, as if she understood that there were boundaries now and that crossing them without warning would only make things worse. She looked thinner than I remembered, but not broken. Maybe just stripped down to what remained after everything unnecessary had been taken away. Lily saw her and ran forward, then stopped halfway, uncertain for the smallest moment. Serena crouched and opened her arms. Lily looked back at me once. I nodded. Then she stepped into her mother's arms. It was not a reunion. It was not a fix. It was simply a child meeting the shape of her own history and deciding, in that moment, not to be afraid of it. When Lily pulled back, she said, very seriously, "Mommy, you have to come on time next time." Serena blinked. Then she smiled in a way that looked real this time, even if it was sad around the edges. "I will try," she said. Lily nodded, as if that answer was acceptable only because she had learned to judge promises by how often they were kept. Later that evening, Margaret and I walked Lily home after the event. The three of us were quiet for a while, listening to Lily chatter about the paper flowers and the snacks and how the teacher had almost slipped on the stage step. At the apartment entrance, Lily ran ahead to the door, then turned back and called, "Daddy, don't forget my lizard." "I won't," I said. She disappeared inside. Margaret stood beside me for a moment before speaking. "You know," she said, "some people think starting over means replacing what was lost." I waited. She looked ahead at the building, then at me. "It doesn't. Sometimes it just means building a life that doesn't ask you to keep bleeding for the old one." The words landed cleanly. No speech. No performance. Just a truth offered without pressure. I let out a slow breath. "I think I'm learning that," I said. She nodded once, as if that was enough for tonight. Then she smiled slightly and said, "Lily is still expecting a lizard. That part seems non-negotiable." That got a real laugh out of me. "Not negotiable," I agreed. That night, after Lily was asleep, I stood at her bedroom door longer than usual. The room was dim, the toy shelf crooked from constant use, the new terrarium sitting on the desk beneath the yellow lamp. On the wall above her bed hung the drawing she had made months ago, the one with 3 figures under the sun. I had not taken it down. I had decided it didn't belong to the marriage anymore, but it still belonged to her. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was how life kept going, not by erasing what had failed, but by keeping what remained tender and true. I turned off the light and left the room quietly. In the living room, my phone lit up with one new message. "Margaret, Saturday morning still good for the reptile exhibit. Lily said she wants to introduce me to her future lizard first." I stared at the message for a second, then smiled. Saturday is good. I set the phone down and looked toward Lily's room. Outside, the city was still awake, but inside the apartment there was peace, not the loud kind people brag about, but the kind that comes after a storm has finally moved on. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was surviving my own life. I felt like I was living it.